Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fielka. Today is Feb 27, 2022. We want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast, I'm Probably Wrong About Everything, for hosting us today. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with Bruce Clarke, but I'm going to call you Bruno, which is your nickname, your rock and roll nickname. I can dig that, dude. And so you publish your articles under Bruce Clarke. Bruno, where are you calling in from?
Lubbock, Texas, hometown of Buddy Holly.
How cool is that? So the first question is simple. What's the best thing for a human being?
Another human being.
Oh my God. There's no right or wrong answers to any of these questions, but that one you got right. I got the question from Wilhelm Reich, and that's what he says, another human being. It's amazing.
Well, you know, we're meant to be together. That's a thing that life does, you know, but not just with our own species, although that's where you start, and you learn from your fellow humans what it means to be part of the life phenomenon.
Well put. I appreciate that. Bruno, what's your favorite form of information, how it comes into you?
Well, I'm a book guy. That's how I ended up becoming a professor. And so I was just always, enjoyed reading and did well in my English classes, and even music's a close second. That's a different kind of information, but I love reading and writing and thinking about taking the reading I do and then doing my own writing on that basis. So I was kind of natural for an English professor.
Yeah. Beautiful. Now, just a side question. Did you become a reader because your parents were telling you to read? They read as an example, or on your own?
Yeah, well, my folks they met in college and were kind of, they met in the theater at Syracuse University. So they were like drama and literature types, and so I think it just rubbed off in that household. But it wasn't like they pushed it on me or anything. I just, I just absorbed it and took to it. That's my sense.
Why do you think humans collect or gather information?
Because we developed this thing called language, and language takes our experience of existence and converts it into meaning. And to me, that's the term. So information is great, but it's the basis on which we arrive at a sense of what, we still have to bring information into the form of meaning for it to become meaningful. And so language is the straightest shot in that dynamic for the human mind, as near as I can see.
That was good. You anticipated a whole lot of questions we're going to get into. But the next question, Bruno, is this need or want to collect information more innate or more invented by humans?
Well, I don't consider language to be innate. Language is an invention. It's a technology. It's a primal It's a for the creatures that we are. once the language thing got going, that's how we've developed as a culture ever since. And but it, it obviously hooks up with our bodily, organic platform. But in the final instance, in my opinion, we're all part of this unfolding experiment in linguistic technology, and which then translates our needs into desires, and so we desire to know in the way that can be told, right? We desire story. That's why story comes along very, with the arrival of language, right? Because story is an information delivery system, if you want to think of it that way. Poetry, going way back, oral traditions, preserving cultural memory. Then you get writing, then you get the printing press, then you get the internet. So I mean, it's mediation. It's media all the way down to the linguistic root.
Yeah, it ain't turtles all the way down. It's media all the way down. Duh. So, do thoughts create emotions?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the other way around.
Yeah.
So we're still working our way through the Cartesian split between the mind and the body, and working our way out of a kind of a false paradigm. Well, it's not. It's a deep. It really goes back to Plato and the Greek philosophers, but the separation of the spirit from the soma, is deeply embedded in our tradition, and there's a logic to it, but at the same time, I think now, we realize that these separate spheres are completely embedded into each other, and so there's no and so we need to think differently about going from the thought side of things to the feeling states that are really, they're part of a complex whole that and it's that we need to grasp.
Yeah. Great, Bruno. You really get what I'm after. Is thinking more innate or more invented?
Well, my cat is on the seat beside me here, and I feel confident in my belief that Hermes, my cat, has thoughts, but it doesn't have thoughts in the mode of the way its form of thought is whatever the feline organism does in the way of sort of reviewing its experience. For instance, he was here an hour ago, seeming to sleep, and because he was like twitching, and he was making little sounds and he was twitching, and so he must have been dreaming, and so what are those dreams if not the night thoughts? Something's going through that mind. You might as well call it thought, but it's it's non-human thought to which I have no access except in terms of his behavior, which then I have to translate into meaning.
Yeah.
In the mode of my brain.
Yeah, I get it. I don't know what I think until I fill in the blank.
Yeah, hear what I say. That's
Hear what I say. Wow.
that's a
Here.
famous line from somebody. I forget who it is.
That's good. Yes. Yeah, because McLuhan says, I don't know what I think until I say it. Joan Didion says, I don't know what I think until I write it. So that was good. Hear what I
Yeah,
say.
here the hearing part is a metaphor for the until I try to put it into words,
Yeah.
one way or another. But that just shows you that thought, human thought is emerges from this inchoate sequence of feeling states, right? Or at least that's part of the matrix of thought. But then the move into articulation, in a way, that's a choice, or you have to say, I'm going to try to sort out my thoughts or my feelings or my thoughts about my feelings. But that's how we do it. At least that's what sort of, maybe not the only way, but certainly
Yeah.
a
No, that was
primary way.
primary because you anticipated again the next question. Can humans think without language?
Sure.
Yeah.
But it would be in that pre-articulate or non-articulate mode of inchoate, that is to say, unformed. And to me, that's really that's then you're at the boundary between the possibilities of thought and the experience of feelings, right? Because feelings are uh, uh, I mean, once we've got language, once we're no longer infants, right? Which just means the neonate, prior to the acquisition of language, that's a lost moment for us, right? And memory can't, as far as I know, can't get to those first months, but with the acquisition of language, you're already creating that fusion, that coupling between the bodily, the emotional life, and the thought process.
Chomsky says that a language is not just words. It's culture, a tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. Bruno, what do you do when language doesn't work, when language breaks down?
Feel bad.
That's good. I said to this great intellectual yesterday, well, one person said group hug. She goes, nope, I'm not. Feel bad is really good because, again, it anticipates the next question, which is a stupid question, but I'm going to ask it anyways, is your observations of humans, are we more feeling beings or more thinking beings? And just to be clear, I know we're both and you can't separate it, but we invented the words feeling and thinking. So just your observations, are we more feeling beings or more thinking beings?
Well, I wouldn't. So I don't think it's a. I think the request for a quantification is like not the right track.
Yeah.
What I was thinking about as you were asking me that is that what are you rewarded for? If you're part of a family or a community, or if you're part of an ideology that rewards you for anger, then you'll be an angry person.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, if you're if your cultural community reinforcement comes in the mode of approbation of thoughtfulness or concern or care, then I mean, we that goes to the organic root. I mean, we don't even have to go to behaviorism to say we tend to do what we're rewarded for doing. But I'm just thinking of the angry people, like these assholes on planes who are like, acting out on an airplane flight. What the hell's that all about? Why do they feel entitled to be an asshole, putting the lives of hundreds of people at risk, and as well as their own, for some stupid idea that some major asshole is put in their brain?
Hey, Bruno, you really get this. We don't need to drop names. You're communicating very clearly. And I like how you do that, because a woman a few months ago said the word more doesn't function in your question. My whole thing is I'm trying to reinvent these questions constantly and morph them, though they're the same scripted kind of questions I've asked for 40 years. But I like that. What are you rewarded for is actually you're answering a question with a question, and that's helpful to me. So the next question is, the next two questions are from Alan Turing in 1950. Is thinking a function of the soul?
To me, that's like old, that's classical philosophy. Yeah. I mean, that's what Plato would tell you. Yeah. But that all begs the question of what is the soul, or do we? I honor the discourse of the soul. I like soul music.
That is where I've had this go there. That is good. You can't beat soul music. Well, let's go on, because it will come back around.
All right.
The second Turing question is, can machines think?
Yeah. I don't think so. I've done a lot of thinking on this topic, actually, and I've published some stuff on this topic. Of course, Turing is, he's your man for laying down these issues. But if I remember the Turing test, the machine didn't have to think in order to convince you behind the partition that there was a thinking being that you were in interaction with. No, machines process information in the mode of zeros and ones. And there are analogies to be drawn, of course, as the cyberneticians have done, between the neuronal processing in the brain and computational processing in the thinking machine. But I'm not convinced that there is or will be a union or a moment, a singularity, I guess, right, is sort of that I'm highly dubious about the singularity. Not that I'm dubious about the major you know, power of a wired computational noosphere, if you want to call it that, which not really a word I would use, but just to say a distributed the distribution of computational processes that have become micro, you know, implicated, intricated in our organic, cultural, you know, traditional human ways. I mean, so but to me, it comes down to, I mean, the question I think is, does a machine is a machine conscious of having needs or desires? Does the machine desire? Why should it?
Yeah.
And so I just think to me, this whole line of anticipation is misplaced. Since after all, we're trashing the planet, we have better things to think about. That's the way I
really, really well put. Bruno, do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
Oh man. Hopefully you get them on the same, you know, lined up so that they come along as part of the same total package.
But Viktor Frankl, where I got the question, is basically saying meaning is more lasting and happiness is more ends, you know, or is not so lasting. So
yeah,
that's debatable too. Yeah, I mean, and it's all about how we interpret what the word.
I mean, I took happiness to be sort of, in your question, I took it to be in the abstract, right? I mean, a state. But you're right. As opposed to just being happy in the moment.
Yeah.
I mean, one can be happy one day and sad the next.
Yeah.
But then one can be happy about one's sort of larger. I mean, that one has found a lover or a mate, you know, or whatever it might be, or a friend.
Yeah.
You know, I'm happy about these things, and that endures.
That endures too. Yeah, most people say they're too connected, because some of these questions I'm asking you to make a preference or say, you know, a more, when indeed they're connected. So this one is the same thing, but it seems it's up your alley. Does the brain more detect consciousness or create consciousness? And you could even help me on the wording, because I've been saying brain for a while. I say, well, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're detecting it, or are we creating it? And then someone a couple of days ago went, well, it depends on what you decide is the brain. And it's sort of like, I should probably say, and you can tell me how I could better ask it. Should I say, do humans more detect consciousness or create it? Or should I say, does the brain more detect consciousness or create it?
Well, let me put in a good word for the mind. Now, and and I think it's still reasonable to make a distinction between the brain and the mind. The brain is the organic, is the tissue, and the mind is ultra mysterious. And the thing about minds is that we only know our own, as far as in the mode of experience. Although we love to dream about telepathy, and we write science fiction or fantastic stories, and we imagine And we imagine a storyteller who goes into the minds of his characters and tells you what they're thinking as these characters then move through the narrative that's being told. But this is a literary construction. But that's why I think why we're so powerfully moved by good stories told in this manner, because it gives us the kind of vicarious sense that we can know what goes on in other people's minds. So to me, consciousness is the emergent phenomenon of the operation of the brain, but it's the mind that takes it up. The mind is the faculty that registers consciousness, and then is also has the sort of emergent capacity to hook up thoughts and feelings, for instance, to bring the two into not unison, but just into connection within the same field of thought. So that's all, to me, that's in the technical systems theory I like to work with. That's the psychic system, the psyche. In other words, not so big on the soul, except as a traditional notion, but we talk about the psyche. We have psychology and psychiatry and psychonautical offshoots.
Well, I'm just saying, if you were going to repeat that question to a colleague, would you say, Jerry, I think you should change the word brain to mind? Does the mind more detect consciousness or create it? Leave it brain or change it?
Yeah. I mean, I think the spirit of your question is it's the mind is the preferable term, but with regard to detection, see, all I can detect is the words that I can see you, I can see your expressions. You're speaking to me and in a reasonably coherent fashion. And so I'm jumping to the conclusion that your mind at the moment is, flush with consciousness.
Yeah.
But I didn't detect consciousness. I just detected behaviors, and then maybe.
Right. That's good. And what's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
Oh man. Well, totally the speed of thought. But I really, that's a,
that's where
I mean, I was just going to say, in the spirit of the question, the speed of light is finite. The speed of thought seems, in our experience of thought, to be instantaneous, which would be infinite. At least that'd be the implication. Although obviously we know how fast the neuron, in fact, the speed by which neuronic impulses move through the nervous system is also finite, but we don't experience that. We just experience the emergent phenomenon in the instantaneity of our own experience. But they're really two quite separate arenas.
Yeah. No, I love it, because none of these questions have right or wrong answers. But that one you got right. Thank God. There's Audre Lorde, the poet, said you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. Yvonne Rainer responded. She said, you can if you expose the tools. What new tool do you suggest?
That's a cool question.
I
do agree. I agree that you, with the retort to Audre Lorde, because I think the master's tools are too powerful not to avail oneself of for the job of busting up the yeah, the system insofar as it's replicates power differentials that are deleterious to general human community. Yeah, I mean, I think this thing that we're using now to have this conversation, I mean, it's funny because when the email and the internet, I've kind of studied the rise of the the movement of the whole Earth network from heavy ecological thinking in the 70s, but man, as soon as the personal computer and the first stirrings of the internet came, I mean, you had a whole movement of cybernetic libertarians saying, this machine, this tool is going to finally bring us democracy, rather than all this programmed network TV. That's, of course, that was Gene Youngblood, was it was totally there saying, with these utopian hopes for the distribution of communication technology, and God bless him, he could still be right. but of course now we're in a period where we're going, oh, holy shit, all these bad actors, have just applied their anti-communal criminal, thievery. You can get on this machine and, loot somebody's bank account. So it's like, but then of course we read Neuromancer, and we're we love to see the cyberpunks like break into the financial, get up there in cyberspace and do their Robin Hood shtick, right?
That's totally the art world hating NFTs, unless you're in the highbrow art world. And I'm like, get over it. Some kid's gonna hijack it. Duchamp invented no fucking thing NFTs years ago, so get over it. But again, I know
where's Marcel Duchamp when you need him.
He's still here. So, what new toy do you suggest?
That's a fun question, but I'm just not a toy person. I confess, I'm just a kind of troglodyte when it comes to popular music. So, I mean, but I try to keep my ear to the, but I don't know, I mean, how can you do better than a guitar anyways? Well, what do you need?
That's it. Your favorite toy, guitar. That is the greatest therapy any boomer could have. I mean, just a guitar or any instrument, or
any instrument, whatever.
Or a piano.
But I love it that people, but there's all this sonic experimentation going on, and to me, that's beautiful, and just that's art is taking, the artists, the really dedicated artists, they're out there playing with the new toys and or taking the old toys and finding new things to do with them. And to me, that's that
was good. Bruno, what do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
You should not go to bed with worries. It's not healthy. You should just park them in your, in your worry place.
Hey, I like you. You're a really wise person. I appreciate your time. You really get what we're after. So McLuhan learned from Ezra Pound that artists are the antenna of the race. They broadcast and detect the hidden psychic effects of our inventions so that we can learn how to cope with what we don't like about them. So this was a major question McLuhan probed, and I asked you, why do we humans ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
Somewhere in Paterson, Pound's friend Carlos Williams says, we for want of art, we go astray. What we need is lying all around us. That's a cultural thing, and that's obviously, you don't want to generalize about all humans, but yeah, art is a tricky thing. I mean, the whole NFT thing. That's really not my world. Music is the art that I'm most embedded in my go-to form. But the art world has been dancing with capitalism, in a way that really, I just think, and you see, these insane amounts of money being exchanged for, to me, so I don't know, all this artificiality is of all this extraneous evaluation is kind of hard to separate from the phenomenon now. And I don't know if that's a turnoff, but I think there's still this there's this economic factor that goes alongside the cultural factor of, again, what you're exposed to, what you're rewarded for knowing, what you're rewarded for experiencing. And so, the artists and the humanities people, they're trying their damnedest to get the stuff out there. And you just gotta help with that. reinforce efforts.
Yeah, you articulate it well, Bruno, and I appreciate it. But by artists, I meant musicians, filmmakers, poets, everybody. And I'm glad you sort of differentiated that and told me about music, because I think music does the same. I mean, Frank Zappa said he was a devout capitalist, but he basically fought being a normal rock and roll guy and spending all his money on stuff that I won't talk about another rock star spends on. He spent it on making more money. Making more music, Yeah.
Well, he was a hero of mine back in my formative. I had that album, was it just the Mothers of Invention?
Well, Freak
Out with the Mothers of Invention had the song Brown Shoes Don't Make It. That was I didn't follow Frank all the way along his development, but
but you even go to the guys in DC, Ian, whatever his name is, I think he was in the Misfits, the punk guys, and they go, we won't advertise in magazines that have cigarette ads, and we will keep our admission price down to $5 at all concerts and all that. So there are people in the music world that, let's say, want to show their integrity in that. But
God bless them. I mean,
I know.
When we were young, it was go hear a major rock star for $5, $10. I mean, now it's insane.
Yeah.
I mean, how the kid's gonna, you know,
Yeah,
get it?
but what you said was really important, because you said Carlos Williams had a poem, "Save for what of art, save for want of art, we go astray." It's
Yeah, that's a
similar, I
paraphrase.
think. Say it again.
That's a paraphrase of his
That's a
advice.
paraphrase, yeah.
Yeah.
And you're saying his character Paterson, or what was the word Paterson in regards
That's
to
the
that?
name. That's the name of this long form poem that he wrote later in life for the city Paterson, New Jersey.
It's
Uh,
in, you mean that line is in Paterson?
yeah,
The,
yeah,
yeah.
it's in.
Oh, that's helpful, because I've taken a line out of Auden and I've rephrased it and said it for years. And I'm curious if it's similar or different from what you were just saying with that Williams line. Auden basically said the mystery of art, and I expand it to music, film, cinema, or poetry, whatever. When I say art, literature, the mystery of art is that we don't know if it activates or pacifies us. Is that similar to that word "we go astray," or different?
Yeah, well, Williams was just thinking about how he was a medical doctor. I mean, that's how he made his living. And so he, back in the day when doctors would go into people's homes, and so he would like he would be called to visit the homes of relatively poor people, and he would just kind of see the desperation and the sort of the bad habits that people are forced to have when they're impoverished, and so there's a the this is a verbatim line from Williams. He says the pure products of America, the pure products of America go crazy. And
Yeah.
and I always took him to the pure products are just the people, right? Just kind of the regular people, but for want of art to kind of give them a higher idea of what's possible, just make the usual bad decisions, and end up in all the various fixes that one can be led to. So no, I think, to me, art that deserves the name is never soporific or pacifying. It should be invigorating.
Yeah.
The Yeah, and so but
But
maybe we should make it entertainment, right? Is If you want to make that distinction.
Well, that's a perfect lead in to this, because what I was sort of getting from you there, and correct me, was that movies create false expectations. But is that good or bad? The working class, in the 30s and 40s, 20s, 30s, 40s, they would go and watch Fred Astaire movies and live vicariously. Like, I can dance around and have fun and glamour life, but I got to go back to work tomorrow and work hard. So it was like it created a false expectation. So is that pacifying? Well, maybe this is the line I'd love for you to tackle. Is this is McLuhan in 57 saying it's misleading to suppose there's any difference between education and entertainment. The distinction merely relieves people of the responsibility of looking into the matter. It's like setting up the distinction between didactic and lyric poem on the ground that one teaches and the other one pleases. However, it's always been true, whatever pleases teaches more effectively. So it's complex. There's so many layers to it, but basically is what teaches more effectively, entertainment or education? Well, everybody goes, well, it's better to go to a movie and see about life than be forced to go to school. But you've been in academia all your life, and you're well aware. You can talk about cinema and all the things that are called music, that are called entertainment. So just tackle that line. Whatever pleases teaches more effectively. Any comment on that?
Yeah. Well, that's the tricky part of teaching well, is to do so in a manner that releases the pleasure uh, bound up in the difficulty or the complexity, or that separates artsy art from entertainment pieces, right? I mean, in other words, you can listen to a great pop song, you can listen to the Beatles all day long, to go back to my formative rock listening, and uh, just enjoy the hell out of it. Or you can go back to the same stuff and go, uh, or you can study it, right? You can learn, you bring your education to the form, and then you listen in this whole different way. So you're still enjoying it, but now you're understanding it. You know what the chords are, and what what it means that you've got this kind of progression. Just basic stuff like difference between a major and a minor key. Until you are presented with that very basic modal distinction, it just washes over you. But you go, this song is sort of happy and this song is kind of morose. Why does it affect me that way? Well, of course, that's mysterious as well, that there's sort of but that's what a musical education is about, learning how to work with the emotional connotations of different musical clusters.
You evoked two major things. Mid-career, McLuhan updated his biggest known aphorism, medium is the massage, medium is the message, to the user is the content. Most people don't even know that. He says, okay, abandon that. And all they do is repeat the set. It's the user's content is so heavy to think about. It's how we use it, like you were saying, how we take it in and how we process it. But Harold Bloom said something like, when the kids in the 60s started listening to these lyrics, they stopped reading because all they had to do was hear the lyrics. And that's what I grew up in front of a TV. I'm an idiot. And and I don't even listen to lyrics. I'm like, I'm a complex character. You asked me what are you at the beginning, but it is true. We started to process Bob Dylan's lyrics and then, think that was a new form of literature almost. And the Beatles.
Well, I mean, they gave Dylan the Nobel Prize.
I was just going to say that, but
Harold Bloom, he's a crusty old.
I know, but it's funny because my friend plays the tape on the Dylan hours of Dylan going, 40 years ago, Dylan goes, I'm just a rock and roll singer. I'm not going to win no Nobel Prize or Nobel or Nobel. Well, how do you pronounce it? And he literally says, I don't know how to pronounce it.
Yeah, he was pulling that person's leg.
Okay. Do artists have, and again, artists mean musicians, literature, everything. Artists have a moral obligation.
Not as artists, just as human beings.
Yeah. That's what I'm getting the most. I appreciate that. Are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas?
Old ideas, because most new ideas are old ideas and when they're bad ideas, they've been around a long time. All the bad ideas have already been thought up. So if it's but if it's a really new idea, it's probably a positive development.
That's, you do you know this? The guy who invented the intermittent windshield wiper, Charles Kettering, he said, that's where I get this question from him and Cage. Cage says, I can't understand why people are afraid of new ideas. I'm afraid of the old ones. But here's Kettering. People are very open-minded about new things as long as they're exactly like the old ones. So can you
Novelty, I mean, not that it's an interesting question. The question of novelty and the because novelty, the news is news because it's, at least that's the concept. That's why it's called news. But so novelty is manufactured constantly because that's our expectation, and that's what's demanded. But of course, and then we come around and say everything that's old is new again, because there's not true novelty is really rare, and what you basically got is just cultural for the new generation didn't live through what was new for their parents, and now it's just recycled. I mean, so fashion as a phenomenon is essentially manufactured novelty. So fashionability is not my thing.
Yeah, McLuhan nailed it. In one era and out the other.
I like that.
What can you conjure up your earliest memory ever, or one of them?
When I try to do that, I go back to, and then I say, well, I think I was 4, so I don't know. It's like, but it's really the limit. And now that I've kind of thought about it, because every now and then you try to pull something out, but so I don't know. But this is kind of the limit. My dad, I was around 4. My dad took me on like a 2-seater airplane. A friend of his had a just a Cessna or whatever, some small little whatever you call them, planes that. But anyways, I was wearing shorts, and the upholstery of the seats in the plane was kind of prickly.
Yeah.
And I remember, I vaguely think I remember kind of looking out the window and going, oh, well, this is cool. But it's the prickly upholstery that was making my legs uncomfortable as I was sitting on the seat is the thing that I remember most. And I don't know what to say about that as
that's good.
as the earliest memory, but that's all I got.
Do you think memory is more a curse or more a blessing?
Oh, memory is of course it depends on, I mean, if we're talking personal memory, it's a drag if you've got a lot of bad ones. If we're talking cultural memory, it's really what it's all about, with regard to having any perspective on what's old and what's new. So I'd want to make that distinction. But memory is absolutely foundational to the self. It's foundational to, I mean, all media becomes memory at the moment of transmission, at the moment after transmission. All narrative is essentially the invention is the recreation in another medium of memory. In other words, a narrator has to remember. Narrator's telling a story. The story's already happened, or it could be simultaneous. But anyways, but the text then is part of cultural memory. In other words, that's the enduring thing, right? The art is long because it's placed in a mediatic form that endures above and beyond the feeling states of its creator or its recipients.
Yeah.
So it's all about memory one way or another. I mean, not all, but that's the backdrop. That's the constant background of everything we're doing.
Tell me someone, yeah, that was good, Bruno. I appreciate it. Tell me someone just briefly within your immediate family, then outside your immediate family, who had an impact on you, was like a role model. And what specifically was that impact?
Yeah. Well, I'm the oldest of 6 children.
Wow.
So, and after me were 4 girls, my sisters, and I, so I was kind of not part of their world in a way. Um, uh, uh, but for whatever reason, my family was not like one of these gregarious families where there was like a lot of aunts and uncles and nephews that we would congregate with, like way different, for instance, from the way my wife, from the nature of her upbringing. So I think of my parents, but what I really, both my parents have passed away now, but I'm like the thing that abides in my what I honor them for is that they never laid a trip on me in an ostensible way. My dad was not pushy, didn't force me to do stuff. You could say he was distant, but when I think of it, he was distant in a good way. So he modeled for me intensity of intellectual engagement, but it wasn't anything he was bringing to me, and my mom had her own kind of intensity, although she, had 6 kids in 10 years because she was a 1950s mom. So I just think, but they did not try to push me in any particular direction. When I started a band in 10th grade, it was our basement that the band rehearsed in, as opposed to any of the other parents being willing, right, to put up with the cacophony of 15-year-olds trying to learn their instruments.
It reminded me, just really quick, it reminded me of my dad once. He came into our bedroom when we were smoking pot and he goes, "Burning incense again?" And we went, "Yeah." And I was like, "That's a cool dad." I mean, he could have asked us and he'd just like, "Okay, go ahead." So yeah, that was good. I like what you said. It was deep. Now, what outside your immediate family, someone who had an impact on you?
I think, this will be, indicate my nerd quotient. I had really great teachers, and I think back, and then I ended up as a teacher, so I think I remember my 10th grade biology teacher was this cool dude. I really remember my 12th grade English teacher, and then my freshman year English. I remember them all, but they're the ones that I remember with like affectionate recollection. And of course they weren't really singling me out. I mean, they were just teaching these classes, but I was good in school. It was my thing. But it was the bio, and then in the fullness of time, I study British Romanticism, Anglo-American modernism. I study, all these cats that you bring up, Pound, Auden. But I was, when I really got down to it in grad school, as in Wordsworth and Coleridge, Keats, all these guys. And but then and that's what I was hired to teach here at Texas Tech, was British Romanticism, because that was my I'd published some stuff already by that time. But then I become a literature and science specialist. And it was that, and I know that it was that high school science from the 1960s that got wedged in my brain, because and I remember the paper I wrote in 10th grade biology class, and then I took chemistry in 11th and physics in 12th grade, and earth science in 9th. So these were the Sputnik 60s. And I think I just went to Langley High School. And it was just a public high school, although, it was in a fairly affluent part of Northern Virginia. But I just say that was my science education as a formal thing, because by the time I got to Columbia College, I didn't give a whoop about science, and I just took the science I needed to complete my degree, and then I took astronomy because that was the gut science, right? You didn't really have to work so hard. And then the semester I took astronomy, the Cambodia protest shut down the buildings, and so they gave us all a pass at the end of the semester anyways. So,
No, you anticipated. We're going to go all there. And actually, you answered a question really well. You walked us through that. But let's get back to that in a second. Let's do a couple more of these background questions. Did your parents raise you a particular religion?
We went to the Methodist Church.
Did you check out?
I checked out when I was about 13, 14.
Bruno, do you pray?
No.
If God exists, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
What took you so long?
Do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
No, evil people exist, because evil's not an abstraction. Evil is the name we give to evil acts and evil behaviors, and people that perform evil are evil. You don't need a devil. You don't need a spirit of, you don't need a metaphysical essence of evil. You just need a moral compass and a it's tricky though. But people do, you don't want to go off half-cocked on accusations of evil. I mean, and it's what you do. It's the deeds. The deeds are evil. And then you say, well, and then the accusation on the person makes sense, but of course they could stop doing those things. Then they wouldn't be so evil.
Yeah, that's like, can you separate the art from the artist? Can you separate the sin from the sinner? But actually, the deeper question here, Bruno, you touch on it, is how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? And I'm going to set this one up with a few modern thinkers' thoughts. Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from the mob and the samurais. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. So it's a lot of cute quotes. And the basic question is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you respond to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your
Mhm.
enemy, you empower them.
Yeah, I believe that. I there's uh, I'm familiar with that idea from a really interesting guy named Heinz von Förster. You may or may not know that name. It was an important kind of cybernetic philosopher. But and he basically I saw that uh, way of thinking in something that he expressed, and I think it. Uh, uh, I I mean it's tricky, right? Because if they're just uh, 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 I mean, that's my basic strategy is to turn my back. Is non-acknowledgement as the more effective, because what you want to do is nullify their whatever reward they feel. They're being rewarded by your anger at whatever's putting them on the other side of what you think is right. So, but of course, I mean, criminality, literal. But that's not the idea of the enemy. I mean, the enemy is someone who is opposes you, uh, uh, or opposes what you believe in. Uh, uh, the better strategy, of course, is to advocate for your own belief and to do the things that you think are right. And fuck your enemy.
Yeah.
That is, I mean, just they can go to hell in their own cart.
Yeah. I like that. Advocate your own belief. That's good. So James Joyce sort of did that. He was the first projectionist in Dublin over 100 years ago. And he basically checked out. He said, "This is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree?" Years later, Faulkner said, "Sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism. Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?"
Oh. Plays are art. I mean, things happen in other words, theater is a model of life. It's a fiction. I mean, so we take pleasure in fiction, and also we can take illumination from it. I mean, we can see the modeling of behaviors with regard to whether or not we want to indulge them or avoid them. But to me, that's the question of why, why create anything new? I mean, life. It's not really a life question. It's for the mind and for um, the culture of community, because community is not just a life thing. I mean, it starts with the life thing, but community is a cultural thing. And art is, is a message. Is always aimed at uh, uh, at the possibility of a collective that will and induce a general response, right? That can conduce to that uh, set of people who and so you get all your subcultures of people who identify with specific kinds of creations yeah, I'll leave it at that.
No, it was good, Bruno, and I appreciate it because you sort of walked us through the next question, like what was the tipping point that got you to be a teacher? And you walked us through that really well before. In this question, I would love in your pursuits now more where you've merged science and literature. I mean, literature and science are your sort of main emphasis now, leading into cybernetics and Margulis and Lovelock and Gaia, and that's all applicable to this question. Is a screenwriting teacher told me great art or great pursuits like yours in exploring this. Great film is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. So film, art, your pursuit is what I'm saying. Kubrick says the opposite. A great film is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. What role does intention play in your creative process? In you pushing your project forward, what role does intention play?
Yeah, well, you have to want to see what happens if you take on the work. I mean, yeah, I mean, so that's the question posed to the creative process, is that, you know, starts from my desire to produce a work. Just leave it at that level of generality. I mean, I write scholarly books, but to me, that's my medium, you know,
That's your medium.
scholarly books and articles. But so, and I have inducements to do this, but I don't do it, you know, and I appreciate those inducements, like, you know, having a job at a university where they expect me to do these things. But fortunately, I like doing these things.
Exactly.
So, but I want to get back to something else, because I want to get to the other side, which is the side of reception. Okay, because there are more receivers when it comes to art. There's more. The audience is larger than, you know, and the audience is the ultimate criterion, right?
Well, wait, so, this is Bruno. Let me just interject, because the follow-up question is what you're probably answering. So let me just slip it in really quick. I would usually follow up, say, what's your intention? What's the intention in your creative process? Because it could be in you playing music, but you really zoomed it in and you go, my creative process is making books and teaching and writing articles. Duchamp said there's no art without an audience. How much do you think of your reading public when you're writing your book? So that's maybe what you were leading towards.
Well, you know, in the moment of that labor, the audience is only a visionary company. It's you hope to find an audience, and you write to your ideal reader, I would say, and my ideal reader might be, and if I'm using, which almost always is the case, somebody else's work as a provocation, or writing about somebody else's work, then I'm kind of writing to them, you know, to say, let me offer you what I think about your creation. But probably they're not going to be the one reading it. So my kind of going back to the side of the audience was about my another conviction, which lines up with one of your one of the quotations that it was McLuhan saying, which I'd never heard that one, the one about the user.
User is the
content. Okay, yeah. So the user, of course, is the audience, the one who receives the work, whatever it is. I'd say meaning, right? In other words, meaning is in other words, I can intend to transmit a meaning that I think what I say means, but whether you understand it in the way I do is totally up in the air. In other words, so that the meaning of my work, whoever takes it from me, the meaning they take from it is their own meaning, right? It might coincide with my meaning, but in any event, I think the idea is that it's that meaning always has to be constructed. You just don't get meaning in a packet that goes pop in your brain. You have to work on the work. And it might be instantaneous. I mean, but in any event, and see, that's why information is a really tricky concept to me, because information is really about the coding protocol by which I get my meaning into a semiotic system, that by which then that signal can be transmitted to a receiver. The receiver gets the signal, but then they have to figure out what the hell it meant. And often it's just straightforward, but nevertheless, the meaning is constructed on the basis of the information as received, and so there's no guarantee of sameness in that process.
That's good. It reminded me of McLuhan said, communication of the new is a miracle, but it's not impossible. And so he favored this. He would have loved this. He favored communication with eye contact and verbal exchange. And, that's what he was all about. Even though he wrote 22 books, they're unreadable. They're like Finnegan's Wake, but it doesn't mean he didn't love this idea where you said something to me, Bruno, and then I sort of try to spew it back to you and go, is this what you meant? And then you can say, well, you sort of got it or didn't. But again, I would just go back. Why? Well, no, let's do this one. McLuhan said that everything we invent extends some humanness. So clothing extends our skin, knife and fork extends our teeth, philosophy or religion could extend consciousness. It doesn't have to be tangible. What does the writing utensil extend for you? Whether you're writing your books with a pencil or a keyboard, what humanness does the writing tool extend for you?
Yeah, I'm kind of familiar with this. Isn't one of those unreadable books The Extensions of Man?
That's exactly. It's called Understanding Media Extensions of Man. It's the word extension. Yeah.
So to me, that's a kind of humanistic way of describing it, which I don't know that, which I mean, we can use to make a certain kind of sense. But I think nowadays, if we kind of the media theory is I think more thinking about the technicity of media media technology. In other words, it goes way beyond the human. It goes to the fashioning of the machinery out of the material, out of the material affordances. In other words, it goes to the earth to get the substance for the manufacture, for the invention of so it's the technology in other words, these sort of networks are sort of emerge and then modify the built environment, and so become part of the built environment in its very fine elaboration into something like this this internet software that we're using at the moment,
which is basically live TV. This happened in the 50s. And we don't need a studio in New York with Elia Kazan clunking around with these huge things. But I almost what you touched on, because I'll just give you an example. I asked a poet, what does your tool extend for you? And he says tears. And I thought, oh, that was touching, because it's a humanness. And he could have said, it extends my finger. Like McLuhan was asked, what did film extend? And people go, your eyes or memory. And he goes, no, your foot, because you're traveling. So there's no right or wrong answer. It's just like a metaphor. It's all metaphoric. But you touched on with your answer that now we fashion it, we make it out of the earth, was what I learned from Carolyn Casey. She propagates all the time is biomimicry. So going back to your music, your love of music, which I love as well. There's a guy in South America who looked at the edge of the mountain range and took that pattern and put it on his music paper. Or Messiaen, listen to birds. Or, better yet, Sun Ra or Eric Dolphy. They go, where'd you get your music from? And he goes, the crickets and the birds. So were you sort of talking about biomimicry? Is that
no, I was talking about something else.
Okay, go ahead.
I was just although there's the discourse of biomimicry, is I'm familiar with it, is this is something the biosemioticians talk about a lot, right? That bird song, whale song. I mean, these are this is a kind of non-human musicality. The world, a kind of musicality that emerges from other forms of life. But one can extend that certainly to the wind and the rain through the trees. Our whole universe of sound connects us to the let's just call it the earth. I mean, we may to build communications technology, we have to extract metals. That's kind of what I was getting at. Okay. And that's where we get them. And unfortunately, I'm reading a lot now about how, it's going to be great if we can get to a solar economy, but to build these wind turbines, you need these rare metals, and you need to continue with all this potentially or certainly, I mean, these extraction processes that are ecologically dubious.
I love how you have this great sense of pausing, and it really captures me to like anticipate what's the word going to be, and then you in that gap is where the action is. It totally reminds me of what Edgar Allan Poe got from the Symbolists, and it's funny because Leo Bersani's Mallarmé study might touch on, or might not, what you just said. He said, the very crises which threatens the writing of poetry sustains poetic composition. So it's like, it's funny because it's crises, like, but it's, you could say the very crises which threatens new communication technology sustains new technology communication. Like, we've got to, go into the earth and get these. We can't do it with a string and a Dixie cup. We got.
No, not any longer. Well, to me, the crisis is perpetual. That is to
Yeah.
say, for a intellectually sentient being, especially for an artist who is committed to the pursuit of the new, and the previously unimagined or uncreated, you're in a state of constant crisis, because how the hell are you going to do that? Uh, 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 but of course that's for a poet or whoever it might be, for a real poet, who, as I would idealize, that maker of a way of seeing, that that I haven't seen before. That's the challenge.
Yeah. I asked for 90 minutes and we're almost there. Can you go a little
Wow.
longer?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay. I appreciate it. It's really been fun. So T.S. Eliot's.
I don't have a clock in front of me. I was kind of wondering how long we'd been doing this, but
Yeah, it's really been
but
fun.
I'm good.
Okay. T.S. Eliot said poetry is outing your inner dialogue. What language is your inner dialogue in?
We're back to that inchoate complexity of feeling state and thought formation. It's in there somewhere.
That is good. One of my favorites was Abigail Child's experimental filmmaker in New York. I asked her, what language is your inner dialogue in? She goes, I wish I knew. So a couple of my film heroes have these mantras: ignore yourself. Jonas Mika said there is no self-expression. The great jazz pianist Cecil Taylor says, I'm just a vehicle and this stuff just comes through me. So I know it's both. It's a stupid question, and it's just your inclination, what your guess or hunch is. Is art making, meaning music making, book making, is it more self-expression or more your vehicle for whatever technology or culture is dominant?
It seems like a choice an artist could make. There was a genre of the confessional poets that were in vogue half century ago. I mean, but of course, it's a perennial. We think of the lyric as the modality of self-revelation, self-expression. I've got no problem with the self at that level, because it's only going to work as art if the recipient can identify in some fashion with the experiences that are being told. So I don't have a brief for the Vatic ideal of art, right? I'm just a vehicle, and like I'm the prophet of an art message coming from the cosmos. That seems like a little highfalutin.
That's good. But it's like this, going back to the music we were raised on. Ginger Baker, they said, where'd you get your drum sound from? And he says, I was in London when they were bombing us. So the bombs went off like this. boom, 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 boom. And so that's what his drum sound was. So again, it's romanticizing it.
Yeah.
The real hidden question.
Well, that's biomimicry for you.
Well, even worse is Missy Elliott, this rap star, said she learned how to sing from car alarms. Yeah, but the hidden question here, Bruno, really is: can art making be egoless?
Yeah. Yeah. Probably not.
Yeah. Is perception reality?
No. But it is the best we can do. Now, because the thing about perception is you have to have a psychic system wired to a sensory being with with sensory mode. But the point is, getting right down to it, perception is a product of the individual psyche, right? The seat of perception is locked inside the mind, along with the thoughts that the perceptions may bring about. Now, if I'm articulating the thoughts I have in response to these perceptions, then I'm in a whole new mode. This is not the mode of perception anymore. This is the mode of articulation. Yeah.
Very good. What's more important, conviction or compromise?
Conviction, because compromise is, is fine, but if you don't have a conviction, then there's nothing to compromise.
Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength, rather than we're normally taught to overcome a weakness. Tell me a weakness you turned into a strength.
My own perception of my adolescent self is that I was a shy person. I was not whatever that word is that I can't think of. But so I strapped on a guitar, you see. And that's how I made it through high school. But I think I'm not terribly gregarious, outgoing. No, I'm reclusive.
Yeah.
I think of myself now. I don't know that that's a weakness or that shyness is. Socially speaking, it's
Right.
it's sort of it's the weaker side of interaction. But that's why that's why books and albums just go down, hunker down with some art, and gradually, but obviously I always had institutional context to come, because in the classroom I was fine, and I like being there, and I like the way that would format and provide me, because I had ideas.
Yeah. No, you answered the question.
That's what professors are there for, right? Is to midwife your understanding of your own ability to come up with reasonable ideas. Yeah.
That was great use of the word midwife. I need that. That was a good word to throw out. But if you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
I'd say, hang on, the braces will come off in another year.
Nice. Anger can be a productive emotion when fill in the blank.
Um, when you don't let it fester.
Beautiful. What caused matriarchy?
What cause? I'm sorry. What
Caused. What
caused
caused it? Caused. Caused it.
what caused it? You mean
Yeah.
in the long historical view of the phases of human culture?
Well, pretty
I
much
think,
you
yeah,
put the question in the context you want, but I mean, you've studied Gaia theory. It's pretty
I would. Oh, well, Gaia theory has nothing to do with matriarchy.
okay.
Uh,
Then
but
in any context you want, yeah, put it into the
maternity. Okay, the answer is maternity. The eternal feminine, right? Or the maternal feminine, somewhere in there. God bless them. Women bear the children,
yeah.
and have, you know, and men have always felt uh, 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 left out.
How would James and Lynn answer this question, and how do you answer it? What's the most significant difference between men and women? Physical aside.
Oh God. They gender issues were really not a part of their dialogue or of their presentation of Gaia, but yeah, that's another story. That's a hot potato.
Yeah.
I'd just throw that one back at you because
No, I'll tell you, this is simple. Before, what do you call that Me Too movement, 90% of people go, women are more feeling, men are more linear. And now it's like you could get shot saying that. So who knows? It's a tricky question. I usually
yeah,
leave
I
it.
think it's time to shift into the non-binary when it comes to that stuff.
Can you forget to die?
Don't see how you could.
How do you find peace of mind?
Uh, uh, Arranging my life so, for the most part, I only have to do what I want to do.
Nice. That's called time management. That's what I call it. Right? Is that what you call it?
I'd call it life management.
Life management. Yes. It's good. So these are 5 quick Alan Watts questions, just off the top of your head in a couple words. Who started it all?
Mm. Unknown.
Are we going to make it?
For a while.
Where do we put it?
Where the sun don't shine.
Who's cleaning it up?
We'd better get on the case because it's our mess.
Nice. Is it serious?
If you care about people.
Yeah. Just a couple more, Bruno. This has really been fun. I love people who laugh after I ask each question. George Carlin's daughter, I worked for George, and George Carlin's daughter is really smart, and she'd go like this, crack up like you do, laugh, then she'd go, take a deep breath, and then she'd answer it. So it's like breathing. I like it to be fun and laughable, and should toilet paper come off the roll over or under?
Over.
Why?
More convenient.
Tell me something good you never had and you never want.
That's a stumper. I mean, I think I've pretty much had all the good things ever conceived a desire for.
Yeah. If you were in a vat of vomit up to your neck and someone threw a bag of shit at your face, what would you do?
Close my eyes.
Oh, that's a good answer.
Well, don't you know the old song that the lyrics end, if you ever get hit with a bucket of shit, be sure to close your eyes?
I don't know that. That's the first.
Well, that's the last part of the lyric.
Do you know the artist? Meaning old song?
Oh no, it's just something I learned as a kid.
Close your eyes. That's amazing. I don't know that. Close your eyes. Yeah.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
I happened to gig with Frank Zappa in 1970, I think it was.
You mean you shared the bill?
Shared the bill at the Fillmore East with Frank Zappa.
What band were you in?
Sha Na Na.
You played guitar in Sha Na Na?
Bass guitar.
You played bass in Sha Na Na. Yeah, go ahead. I'm listening.
So I was backstage, and the memories from that time are hazy, and so I'm never quite sure. But I recall that some guys in Frank's band I was hanging out, Frank was in the dressing room, but some of the guys, and they were Lowell George and some of the guys that became Little Feat. Am I remembering that correctly?
You are remembering it correctly. It's Roy Estrada was one of the original members of the Mothers of Invention, the bass player. And eventually Lowell George played in Frank's band, and
Right.
Frank knew, he says, Lowell, you're good. You should just go form your own band. And, Little Feat's an amazing band. And Frank spawned a lot of great people. I mean,
well, there's just okay, I'm glad that I remember that correctly, because I remember just asking, and I came to really love Little Feat's music. Okay, but they weren't quite Little Feat yet at that moment. Right. But I remember asking, so what's it like to be in Frank Zappa's band? And I don't know if it was Lowell or but whoever it was said, I tell you, man, Frank's a cop. He doesn't put up with any, like,
well, here's the thing.
Bad behavior in his bandmates.
Yeah. I mean, Frank had rules. He's like, dude, I hire you. If you're going to go do drugs, go do them on your own time. If you're going to be in
Don't get loaded before the show.
Yeah. And that was a sensibility that came from years. You had, Charlie Parker used to be nodding, and the guy next to him would just elbow him when his solo came up, and he'd play the most amazing solo in the world. So did drugs help his solo, or did it hurt his solo? It's a big picture view. And Frank just said, hey, Frank did 2 drugs, coffee and cigarettes, but he wouldn't say these are drugs. He would, because they're not illegal drugs. But still, you could be addicted to some legal drug and not get in trouble being in Frank's band because you're crossing into another country and they bust you. He doesn't want to have that in
Yeah,
his.
no, it makes perfect sense
Right.
as a, because his, of course, that was like Zappa was totally not in the, you know, he was not like some guy from the Jefferson Airplane, shall we say. He was not a hippie dude.
It's funny you bring that up because Frank was part of what created the freak movement. And I asked Grace Slick in person once at a health lecture. I went up to her and says, did you used to sing for the Jefferson Airplane? I mean, I knew it was her just to come up. And she goes, yeah. I says, could I ask you a quick question? And then 8 questions later, she goes, okay, that's enough questions. I said, there's a track on some big Jefferson Airplane box set where it's Frank, Grace, and Spencer playing like a. And I says, tell me about that. And she started telling me all about Frank. Frank cast her in his movie. And it didn't happen, but she says, I wanted Frank to produce our first album. I was like, yeah, like Yorman, Marty, Paul, and that's all male, pure male egos, and they're going to let Frank come in, and she's just the girl, the woman saying, let's have. But in the long run, Spencer, the original Jefferson Airplane drummer, has this great quote saying basically Frank was like one of the only people who could articulate what was going on in the 60s. Like Madison Square Garden, or not Madison Avenue was selling you bell-bottom jeans, dude. It wasn't like you think we're rebelling. We have our own. So
yeah,
it's a
no, he was great. He just punctured the self-importance of the, like a band like the Airplane, which sort of was like, oh, we're gonna,
well, I love the Airplane, and I mean,
no, they were great, but
I know what you're saying, and it's like, look at Frank is like all humans. He has weaknesses and strengths. And you could say him being a cop or him being a dictator or the leader of the band was a weakness, or you could say
I wouldn't say that.
was a strength. So, this is the problem with all the documentaries on Frank, which I've studied them all, is that they rarely get it. They get into the depth of who Frank was and why he did it. Just to summarize, what I learned best from studying Frank for 50 years is to embrace contradiction. He really went from Catholic, in fact, I'm leaving out this question, but it goes like this, and I'll have you comment on it. You create what you resist. Bob Goldthwait, a Zappa fan, morphed it into you are what you hate. James Joyce said, it's a curious thing how your mind is super saturated with the religion in which you say you disbelieve. And Louis Buñuel said, thank God I'm an atheist. That's the same thing with Frank. Frank and Louis Buñuel are the same. They're raised Catholic. They hate, and James Joyce, they hate it so much that that's what they spend their whole life talking about, and it's part of who they are.
Well, I mean, they turned it into creative drive.
They've turned it into creative drive, but it's also how much you diss. What you diss is what you persist, so it's like you said a good line earlier, like when like it empowering your enemy, like how much, if you acknowledge your enemy, how much you empower him. You said something like, no, just push your agenda, and like don't say end war, because that's just empowering war. Why don't you say seek peace or propagate peace? but you know,
John Lennon had it right.
what do you mean?
Give peace a chance, man.
Give peace a chance. Yeah. Yeah. John Lennon. Yeah, that was good. So just a couple more here. Bruno, thank you for allowing us to go a little longer. Cause I mean, if we could do a whole
thanks for taking my Frank Zappa question. Cause that
oh, no problem.
I wanted,
you get me started. You get me started.
Yeah, no, okay.
All it does is I would love to do, because you know, I want to do who are your three favorite living rock guitarists, who are your three favorite dead rock guitarists, who's your three favorite bands. We should just do a podcast on music alone, because I love to talk music, and I especially love to talk guitarist, you know. So
another time perhaps.
Yeah, we'll do it. So here's the three remaining questions. Thornton Wilder said it in 28. Art is confession. Art is the secret told. But art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time. You've laid your cards on the table for more than 90 minutes. I'm not insinuating you haven't answered this, but what's it really all about for you?
Well, it's what it's about is what I've been doing, you know, which is kind of single-mindedly following my intellectual passions where they lead.
Yeah.
And that's how I got to literature and science, because that was like a midlife academic shift that wouldn't be welcome on a lot of faculties, but I was given space to change. But really, that's, you know, it's kind of like, why did I leave that world where I was where I was on the same bill with Frank Zappa, to go back and finish college and go to grad school and just kind of because what it's all about for me is following my my line of thought to see where it takes me. And so that's it, man.
That was good. What's the cultural shift you see developing today that inspires you?
Wow. Well, we've got a name for it. It's called posthumanism. So I've kind of hung my hat on that peg, but what it basically means is getting over the idea that we're the center of the world or the universe, and realizing that we're all in it together on the only planet we'll ever know, and so we've got to, and it's not just we've got to stop driving any more species to unnecessary extinction, but you know, it's all hands on deck to try to hang on to our current ecology, which is hanging by a thread, but it's the only one we're gonna like. And so yeah, and people they're getting the message. I mean, bit by bit, this, you know, it's this message or nothing. And headway is being made because the, you know, the dire situation is just staring us in the face, you know, with the weather anomalies, forest fires, ocean sea rise. I mean, come on, people.
Come on. Now you sound like a rock star. Come on, people. That is, you
Get
still got,
together now.
you still got it in you. And it's also Bucky Fuller. He said, all crew, no passengers. I mean, that's, but
Yeah,
tell me the three main, if someone wanted to study post-humanism, the three main people who rooted that sensibility for you.
well, to me, I mean, there's scholars that pursue it, and I consider myself one of them. My good colleague Kerry Wolfe, Wolfe, is a major thinker in this vein. But let me take it back to Lynn Margulis.
Yeah.
Lynn, as the co-author of the Gaia hypothesis, as a crucial advocate for symbiosis in the biosphere, as a fundamental dynamic of evolution from the get-go, that she would, she was a post-humanist, but she didn't use that word, but that's what her philosophy of life amounted to. So I just say, read anything by Margulis, and she just says, we're all standing on the microcosm. The foundation of life is the microbes, and they and in fact, we are really just ramified symbiotic mergers of microbial syntheses that happened over, that came up out of the primal form of life, which was bacterial. So, and so, if we really saw ourselves in complete ecological, evolutionary, biospheric context, we'd see that we're beholden to the, all the life that that went before, and but for which we wouldn't be here, and so we've got to rethink how we behave and treat our neighbors.
Treat our neighbors and behave. But Bruno, you said it. Well, one of the Alan Watts, the first Alan Watts 5 questions is who started it all. A couple months ago, a guy said bacteria.
Well, he was
right. And I was, that's very good.
But you said who? That's not a who exactly. So
that's not a who exactly. But it is sort of, again, I say put it into the context you want so people can answer how they may. But just before I ask the last question, can you summarize Gaia theory in layperson's terms? I mean, you sort of did what you did with Lynn there, really good. That helped me get it. But I mean, if you were just
but well, I'll give it a shot.
Go ahead.
It's the theory according to which life took over the planet and integrated its continuity with the physical or geological environment, such that at a certain point, the geological environment was the environment that had been deposited by the effects of life, because all life takes in nutrients and gives off effluents, right? And gradually, so at a certain point, life and its geological environment on the surface of the earth produced an emergent phenomenon of planetary regulation of the atmosphere in particular. So, and the end result of this was that Gaia, as the coupling of the biota, or all life taken together with its geological environment, produces a system that maintains the habitability of the planet for as much of the life, for the life that exists at that moment. And then as life evolves, the system evolves. So Gaia is the system that emerges from the coupling of life and the environment to bring about its own self-maintenance and its own self-continuation at the planetary level. How's that?
That was good.
Dietary.
Self-maintenance. Now, that was so perfect. I have to ask a bonus one. Now, cybernetics in layperson's term. How does that relate to that? What is cybernetics? Because you're navigating a boat. Isn't that the root of the word cybernetics?
The Greek root means to govern. It's the same root as the word for government or governor. So it has to do, cybernetics is vastly complex, but at root, it's about self-regulating systems.
Self-regulating, yeah.
And that's the cyber. And the cyber has nothing to do with machines at that level. It just has to do with a system that whose own output feeds back into it so that it regulates its ongoing behavior, its ongoing performance. So yeah. Gaia is a cybernetic system in that sense.
That was beautiful.
And that's how Lovelock conceived it as an emergent self-regulating system at the planetary level.
And back to music for a second. Utah Phillips said, anarchy is making rules for yourself and not other people. Is that the same as self-regulating?
At the individual level, might as well. You give yourself it's also called autonomy. That's which just means giving yourself your own rule. But that's always relative to the affordances of one's cultural and material environment. And so it's important not to remember that whatever system you're thinking about, the conditions of its possibility lie elsewhere, even as it interacts. In other words, it can change those conditions, but only by maintaining a habitable or viable operationality for itself. So there's a give and take between the self of the system that basically, like all living things, wants to persist as long as possible, and the maintenance of an environment that continues to provide the wherewithal to keep the show going. And that's what we're up against now, is the limits of the carrying capacity, to use that term, that it's the environment as coupled to the system that is imperiled in its interconnectedness, and where we've got to rethink where we fit into that matrix, he said on his Gaian soapbox.
No, that was beautiful. And the last question, I hope our dialogue can continue on and on forever in eternity. Bruno, thank you so much. What gives you the most optimism?
I mean, the thought that comes to me is we know what to do. It's just a question of getting our act together to do it. Yeah. But it's better than not knowing what to do.
Well, it's funny because here's the root of that. Just to go back to the first question was, what's the best thing for a human being? You said other people. That's I got from Wilhelm Reich. The last question I got from, this is a question they asked Groucho Marx at the end of his life. What gives you the most optimism? He said other people. The exact, back to that. So it's sort of like we know what to do, but we got to get our act together and how to do it.
Yeah. There you go.
Thank you so much, Bruno. I
Hey,
really appreciate it.
my pleasure. Be in touch. Let me know how to link up to this.
I'll send you the link within a day. No problem.
Okay, terrific.
Thanks a
Jerry,
lot.
it really was fun. I went out to see what maybe I'd be in store for, and I came across your cold calling Dr. John, and I said, okay, now I know. I basically know what you're going to do. It's just like
Oh
you
my
said,
God.
Dr. John, you're a philosopher of the cosmos. Tell me, oh great doctor. And you hit him with the same kinds of questions, and he
it was
just
all
followed
the
along with it.
it was all the same questions, but if you notice that the quality on that was horrible. So I'm glad you got through it. The best was that I said, if you were walking down the street and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say? And he goes, I won't go there. It was like, it was some voodoo thing. Like, I ain't going there. I ain't time traveling. But yeah,
All
that
right,
was
man.
really special. And when he passed, I should have transcribed it and got it out there. But my big thing is just
Well,
keep doing this. So that's
yeah,
fun that you
you
went
can
to him.
always
Yeah.
get around to it in a spare moment.
Yeah. But we got to do one on music because that could get really fun too.
Well, you know where to find me, man.
All right.
Okay,
Thanks.
peace.